Name's Detective John Mercer. They called me Jack in the days when you had to earn a nickname with scars and coffee stains. Mid-40s, retired early. Not proud, not ashamed. Just stuck on a loop I didn't ask to install. You ever have a case that behaves like gum on your shoe? You scrape, you rinse, you stomp. It stretches, it thins, it snaps back. That's me, that's this. The locked apartment case. The one they signed off as neat. The one that smiles at me when I can't sleep. The one that tells me she died alone and then whispers, "Did she really?" I talk fast when I circle this memory. It's speed run meets slow burn. I keep thinking if I tell it quickly it won't hurt. Spoiler, it still hurts. It's a quiet ache. It's a loud echo. It is the thing that refuses to be done. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was supposed to be off shift. I was supposed to be halfway through a burger, not halfway into a winter hallway that smelled like wet metal and radiator ghosts. There were footprints on the floor and breath clouds in the air. The landlord called it in. Welfare check gone grim. Apartment door locked from the inside. No answer to knocks. A neighbor said, "She's quiet, but that's too quiet," and we did the dance, the official one. Witness list, camera glance, door look, hinges sigh, lights off, lights on. The scene was a painting. Maybe that's what bothered me. It looked composed, even in its mess. Her name, I'll spare it. This is not a true crime fan club. This is not merch and microphones. This is me still trying to square a circle. She was mid-30s, lived alone, steady job, remote during the week, friends who messaged, a plant named something silly, a calendar with little doodles. The apartment did not scream catastrophe. It whispered routine. Now here's where the case locked itself and locked me. Door deadbolt set from the inside. Old school, thumb turn, chain latch engaged, no sign of force on the frame. Windows latched, or so the initial sweep said, but there's a draft. I felt it on my skin before I saw anything. A thread of winter air weaving around my wrist like an argument. It was midwinter, the kind that teaches your bones to spell frost. Why was there a draft if the windows were shut? And I'm telling you, this was not my brain inventing texture. The air had an opinion. She was on the floor of the living room, not far from a coffee table that tried to look casual and failed. Mug, book, candle that had been lit at some point, then pinched out. It would have been cozy if it wasn't fatal. The body. I won't do gore. I don't need to, and you don't need to hear it. Official cause of death leaned towards self-harm, quick and clinical. It painted a line from her wrists to a goodbye note that never existed. It assumed she chose silence over noise. The room nodded yes to anyone who wanted to leave. Except I don't like nodding rooms. Something about it was off. Not big things. Not the kind you can take a photo of and hold up like evidence. Tiny things. Sand in the gears. Missing pieces that only matter when you notice they matter. Like the cell phone that wasn't there. And I mean wasn't there. Not on the counter. Not under the couch. Not charging. Not dead. Not wedged behind a cushion. Not vibrate buzzing with friends asking if she's alive. You can tell yourself someone moved it. You can tell yourself people misplace. But her bag sat by the door like a dog waiting for a walk. Keys in the bowl, wallet zipped, everything aligned. Phone gone. That's a puzzle piece someone palmed when I wasn't looking. And the mug. Let's talk about the mug. 2 lipstick marks living on the rim like it's rent controlled. 2. Not a smudge twice over in the same place. 2 separate ports of entry. 2 mouths. Or 1 mouth twice. But the angles told a different story. Those little half moons. One on the handle side, one on the opposite. It said conversation. It said company. Or it said chaos, because maybe she turned the mug while she drank.
I can hear the pushback. I do the pushback for you.
But my inner ledger circled that mug with a highlighter. Then the draft again, because it was midwinter. Because the radiator hissed like an angry cat. Because everyone in that building talked about heat, like it was a religion they didn't pick, but had to practice. You keep windows shut when the outside is bite-your-face cold. So why did the air feel like a whisper from the street? We powered through the routine. Photos, measurements. The ceiling fan had dust on it like powdered sugar. The sink dripped a pattern you could set a watch to. The oven clock flickered 2 minutes slow and then correct. She didn't smoke. No ash anywhere, no smell of it. But the window by the fire escape had a shade pulled down just enough to hide not enough. The latch, it was latched, but the seal felt crooked. You know the feeling when a zipper almost closes but not quite. That's the window. Sealed but sulking. If you pressed your palm there, the cold kissed you back. Everyone else leaned on the obvious. Locked apartment. No signs of struggle beyond the sadness. A life that maybe cracked. They wrote paragraphs with words I recognized too well. Self-inflicted, isolated, no forced entry. End of story. It works on paper. It wins the meeting. It makes the file quiet. I could have walked. I didn't. This is where my brain goes feral and I start narrating 20 threads at once. I'm going to slow it down even if my voice wants to sprint because the slow parts are where the hooks hide. Day 1. I set the scene in my head. I'm standing in her doorway. Chain lock dangling like a charm. Deadbolt turned. A small rug curled at the edge, like a dog slept there sometimes, even if none did. There's a coat on the back of a chair. A scarf that still smells like outside. Mail piled with the cheap threats of overdue bills and the fake promises of coupons. The plant droops but isn't dead. The laundry basket is half committed. The playlist stopped halfway through a song that nobody writes their first kiss to. You think you know what happened from one glance. You never do. You audit. You deconstruct. You let the room talk, and you listen like you finally learned how to shut up. When you do that, the room gets louder. It starts telling you it doesn't believe the story being sold. It points a ghostly finger at little oddities. And you go, hang on, did someone edit this script? That coffee mug kept flirting with my eyes. 2 lipstick marks. Same shade, similar maybe. But one was a sharper curve, one was fuller. Could be pressure. Could be her mouth at 2 moods. Could be 2 different people who shared something warm while the world froze. The mug wasn't steaming, obviously, but the ring under it had a halo. Fresh enough that it hadn't evaporated fully when the door opened and the winter jolted in. You can read time and condensation if you want to. You can be wrong, but you can read it. And then the missing phone. In this world, a phone is an organ. It's not just glass. It's routine. It's alarm clock. It's grocery list. It's lifeline. She didn't have it on her. She didn't tuck it somewhere stupid. It was absent in a way that felt intentional. Later, when we pulled records, there was a last ping near midnight, close to home, and then nothing. There were messages from friends the next morning, unread, the kind of stuff you don't ignore unless you can't tap the screen. The apartment had one old landline port nobody used. This wasn't a person who took long silent retreats from her notifications. I asked everyone who let themselves be asked. The landlord wouldn't stop talking about the boiler. The neighbor with the dog gave me an entire novel about the screech in the elevator she swears only she can hear. A friend called me and cried. Her sister flew in with a suitcase full of blame. None of it solved the window. The draft pulled me like a magnet.
There was a fire escape outside that window, the kind your grandmother warns you about because the stairs shake under your feet like they want to be dramatic. The window frame had a bit of paint chipped where a latch meets a latch. You can chip paint by living in a place. You can chip it by opening a window in a hurry. The sill had the memory of dust moved. There wasn't snow on the sill. This is important, and it also isn't. Depending on the heat, on the angle, on the day, melted snow lies or vanishes or gets poetic. But I wanted a footprint and all I had was a feeling. You can't file a feeling. The official take. It wanted me to accept that she had locked herself in, done what she did, sipped from a mug, maybe stared at the city going gray, opened a window for air because the radiator was making her apartment a sweat lodge. People do weird things in winter because buildings don't care about your comfort, they care about budgets. That's a story. It's not ridiculous. It just doesn't click for me with the way the room hummed. You ever build a conspiracy out of lint? That's me. This is where I tell you the theories. This is where I roll out the string on a board you can't see. It's also where I admit my theories annoy me because none of them solve the lock. Option 1, classic. A second person was there. They drank from the mug, their lips kissed the rim. They took her phone when they left through the window like a cat. They staged the door to look like it had never opened. They used the fire escape and some slick trick to relatch the window behind them. but the latch was inside. Could you loop a string in some genius way? Sure. People have pulled rabbits out of locked hats since they invented doors. Could I prove that happened here? No. Could anyone? Not with what we had. Option 2. The mug was an old stain. She hadn't washed it well from a friend's visit. She drank from the same dirty cup because we all do sometimes, because dishes are missions and rest is a protest. Then she did what she did, and her phone was elsewhere because she left it at a friend's the day before, or she lost it on a bus, or someone stole it, and it is pure coincidence that it left the story right when I wanted it most. Coincidence is the villain I hate because it wears a normal face, but you can't arrest coincidence. You can barely argue with it without looking like a conspiracy theorist with a yarn store membership. Option 3. A window that leaks air even when latched. A draft that is just physics playing petty. The seal shifts with the cold. You get a whisper of the outside. The chain and deadbolt are obvious. The door was locked when we got in because we broke it. That part is documented. So the only way in or out was window or imagination. If there was a second person, they had to be a ghost with a diploma in contortion. Or we missed what we missed because the room wanted us to miss it. This is where I become my own hate comment section. I second guess my second guessing. I ask, did you want there to be a mystery because you wanted a purpose? You were tired. You were cold. You were later in your career than your patients. You saw anomalies because you needed a reason to not write the report and go home to your couch and your easy evening. It's a fair accusation. It's the kind that stops you from sleeping and gives you no answers. I went back to that building 3 times on my own. Don't tell anyone. This is the part where I look like the guy who doesn't know how to put work down. Retired future me knows I didn't. I walked the hall and the stairwell and let the walls tell me what they remembered. A building keeps secrets like pockets keep lint. In the super's closet, I found stories about stopped mail and bent keys. On the roof, I found a view of a city that doesn't care if you are looking back. On the fire escape, I tested each step and each rung, and found the one that wobbles like it's trying to leave. I traced the path a non-existent visitor would take, up the exterior, through the window, on a night so cold your breath breaks in half. The window was old but not ancient. It had a latch you can flick if you can get your fingers in. A knife's tip could have done it from the outside if the seal allowed the blade to slip in. But the seal fought you unless you charmed it from the inside. That's the thing. It's half possible. Which means if you want to believe, you can. If you don't, you won't. Confirmation bias dressed like a coat. If someone came, their shoes would have left some whisper. Salt stains on the floor. A tiny grit of outside on the inside. Couldn't find it. We vacuumed the apartment with our eyes. Nothing shouted. Nothing whispered a name, a time, a weight, a step. Does that mean no one came? Or does that mean the world refused to leave fingerprints? Then, there's the draft again. I keep returning to it like it owes me rent. On one of my illicit revisits, I went into an apartment 2 floors down where the tenant liked to complain for fun. She had the same window type, same latch, same crankiness in the frame. I touched it, same tiny breath of winter sneaking in when you think you closed everything. Buildings shift with temperature, she told me, like people shift with grief. The seal cracks open a sliver if the day demands. Science doesn't solve this. It only teases it. The phone. Spoiler. We never found it. The carrier gave me data that was data and not a story. Last ping near home. Then someone either turned it off, smashed it, or carried it into a quiet pocket of the city where signals get shy. I imagined it in a river, being rubied by the weight of cold water. I imagined it in a drawer of some stranger who took it because free is free. I imagined it in the window well, trapped between building bones and weather. The imagination is a circus. You pick which act hurts the least to watch. I asked her friends about the mug. Did she ever have guests? Did someone come over the night before? A friend said maybe, but nothing specific. Someone mentioned a coworker. Someone else brought up an ex who texted too much in clusters at 2 in the morning. But text records were bland. The cluster texter had an alibi, and receipts, and a face that didn't know how to hide things that want to be hidden. He cried anyway. People cry for themselves sometimes. People cry for what they caused, even if they didn't cause it. Tears are not proof. Tears are just wet. You want a smoking gun. You get a draft instead. You want a narrative that clicks. You get a mug that flirts with probability. You want a clue that points inside a circle and says here. You get a locked door and a filing cabinet that yawns. I stayed with it. Maybe too long, maybe not long enough. The report got filed. The boxes got checked. World moved on. That's what the world does. I didn't. I tried. I dated someone who asked me what my favorite movie was, and I said, right now it's grainy surveillance footage because at least it tries. That relationship lasted 3 weeks. I laughed when I shouldn't have. I slept like the inside of a shaken snow globe. I retired early, did I mention? People assumed I wanted my peace. I did. It didn't want me back. I replayed the case in my head like a streaming subscription I forgot to cancel. I paused it at moments that looked ordinary. The candle by the mug that had been lit. Why light a candle midwinter? That's easy. Because it smells like vanilla and safety. Because you want to pretend your life is a snow globe scene with better lighting. Or because someone wanted the room to smell like something else. No, I'm not accusing. I'm suggesting. This is a suggestion soup. It doesn't fill you up. It keeps you at a simmer. The thermostat on her wall was set higher than I would ever set mine. But that meant nothing, except that my dad taught me to wear sweaters instead of pay the utility demons.
The playlist she liked gave me a portrait and songs. Uplifting trash, sad bangers. I put them on one day in my kitchen, and had to sit down because it felt wrong to have her soundtrack in my house. So I turned it off and let my refrigerator hum in A minor. The neighbor below her said she heard a thump at some late hour that could have been upstairs or in her own cupboard because old buildings are ventriloquists. She also said she smelled coffee in the hall that night. Coffee and cold air. That detail seated itself in me like a burr. Coffee and cold air, a mug and a draft. It sounds like the world teasing me with a rhyme. If there was a second person, they took the phone. That's my sticking point. Why the phone? To erase messages, to erase presents, or because it was in their hand when they left? Because normal people carry phones without thinking about significance. Or it fell behind the couch into a portal to Narnia. And I am ascribing villainy to furniture. I did the math on time. That ring under the mug. How long it takes to evaporate when your window is whispering winter and your radiator is hissing summer. I played scientist with no credentials. I placed a mug of her size and weight on my own table and watched circles dry. It made my kitchen into a lab I didn't invite. It made me feel like a clown scientist. It gave me charts in my notebook that looked like graphs a child would draw about magic. It didn't give me certainty. Nothing ever does. There's a version of this story where I found the string on the latch, where I found the scuff on the floor that spelled a name, where I found the missing phone and it was full of messages to someone no one should have trusted. That version is a bestseller. That version gets turned into a series. That version saves me from my own brain. That version is not the truth I have. I have a quiet truth, a collection of small lines that refuse to form a big picture. The wallpaper didn't lie, it just didn't help. The radiator didn't confess. The window complained, and that's it. The mug flirted and then ghosted me. The deadbolt did its job all the way to the end. You want a moral? I don't have one. I have a series of questions that chain themselves like a basement light string. You pull and it gets bright, and then gets dull, and then flickers. Did someone else walk through that door when it was alive, and then leave through the window when everything went still? Did the house itself conspire to make a draft that would trick me into thinking someone else breathed in that room? Did she invite someone in, or did someone invite themselves? Did I want a villain so badly that I turned physics into guilt? Did I want to feel useful so I indicted a mug? People ask why I retired. I tell them I wanted to start my mornings without reading a report that ends with a period that looks like a bullet hole. That's true. It's also incomplete. I stopped because I was becoming a person who couldn't let a door be a door. Every latch was a sign. Every draft was a confession. I was living in the land of maybe with a map that had no compass. Sometimes I imagine her last hours. I try to keep it respectful. I try not to build a theater where she wouldn't want one. I imagine a night that was too quiet. I imagine music soft enough to almost be nothing. I imagine a knock. I imagine her opening the door because we have been trained to be polite, even when we shouldn't. I imagine a conversation that tasted like coffee. I imagine a mug that no one washed because the world was busy ending in the next room. I imagine a window opened a sliver because the radiator was doing its worst impression of a sauna. I imagine a phone in a pocket that didn't belong to her. I imagine a deadbolt turned, while a chain clicked and time decided to be cruel. Theater. I know, but tell me you wouldn't do it if you could not sleep. I went to her sister's house once, post-retirement, like an apology wearing a coat.
I brought a plant because people bring plants to people who are grieving, even if that plant is just a green guilt machine. We sat. We didn't say all of it. We said enough to remind ourselves that the story isn't ours to bend into a shape that comforts us. She asked if I was sure. I told her I was sure of the paperwork. I told her that the paperwork doesn't always tell the mood. She nodded like people nod when you promise uncertainty. I hate that nod. It's a mirror. There's a tiny heavy thing I never put in the report because it's not evidence, it's atmosphere. When I stood by the window the first time, I thought I heard something outside. Not a person, not a voice. A small sound like fabric rubbing metal. It could have been the neighbor 2 floors up turning a curtain. Could have been the city. Could have been my own sleeve. I logged it in my brain. I keep replaying it, boosting the volume, asking if it was a sign. Ridiculous. My rational part says, useful. My obsessive part says, useless. The world says, when I left that scene the first night, the hallway mirror was cracked along the edge, down low where most wouldn't see. A little crack, a little imperfection. It felt like a dare. Look closer, it says. Keep looking. You want to see enough, and you want to stop seeing. Both at once. That's the hobby of people who stare at mysteries until they blink. Tell me you've never stood in a room and felt like you were the intruder. That's how it felt. The apartment wasn't mine. The story wasn't mine. I was the person with the badge and the clipboard and the tired posture who had to put words in a row until a box got ticked. I put the words in. I ticked the box. The world clapped for closure. The world is good at clapping for closure. The world doesn't check if the lid is actually on. Sometimes late, I picture the mug again. Not because of the caffeine math, because it's the most human thing in the room. Lits, heat, conversation, ritual. If I had to pick one prop to tell me the truth, I would pick that mug. I would ask it to speak, and it would say nothing, because ceramic doesn't care about my need for resolution. Then I would put it back on the table and hate myself for asking. I get DMs from old colleagues every now and then. Hey Jack, heard you're living the dream. As if this is a dream. As if my hobby is letting unsolved edges build nests in my diagonal thoughts. One of them once typed, maybe you should take a trip, go somewhere warm. I thought about flying to a beach and then realized I'd probably spend the whole time staring at the way the door to my hotel room locks. Fun at parties, that's me. Bring me to your event and I'll evaluate the windows. Here's a plot twist you didn't ask for. I found a mug at a thrift shop that looked like hers. Not the same. Obviously, just close enough to make me feel weird. I bought it and then I returned it the next day without using it. I am a parody of a man haunted by a cup. My brain is a meme account that only posts latte art and dead ends. There's a version of me that writes this all down like a bedtime story for those who like to shiver. I don't love that version. I'm doing this because if I say it out loud, maybe the narrative releases me. That's a con. Saying words doesn't dissolve memory. But it gives me something to do with my hands. If you want to know what I think, after all of this, after the replay and the re-replay and the graphs and the drafts and the apologies to physics, here it is. I think the official story was tidy because tidy is cheap. I think there were subtle inconsistencies, not capital letter ones. Lowercase letters you only notice if you've been alphabetized by grief a few times. The phone missing is not a vibe, it's a concrete absence. The 2 lipstick marks are a suggestion, not a confession. The draft is either a physics lesson or an accomplice. Altogether they form a shape. That shape is either a face or a cloud, depending on how you squint. Did someone walk through that window? If they did, they left a footprint in the air, not on the floor. Did someone talk to her and leave with the one thing that could talk back later? If they did, they gambled that we would accept a locked door. We did. Did the world want me to stop because the world is tired of my genre? Probably. I tell you this because the locked room trope is our favorite magic trick. We love to say, oh, there's no way. And then we clap when the magician shows us the string. In real life, sometimes the string is invisible or it's not there. Sometimes the trick fails and we stand around debating what we think we saw while the person at the center gets turned into a plot device. I hate that. She was not a device. She was a person with playlists and a plant, and a habit of leaving her keys in a bowl because that's where you leave keys if you don't want to hate yourself later. I still walk by that block sometimes. I don't go in. I stand across the street and pretend I'm waiting for someone who's late. Maybe I'm waiting for me to catch up. Maybe I'm waiting for nothing. The fire escape looks like a ribcage. The windows look like eyes. The draft looks like memory. I breathe in the kind of air that only cities make. Exhaust and bakery and someone's laundry detergent. I think about the night. I think about the mug. I think about the phone. I think about how a whole story can spin out of 3 small things, and how those things can also mean nothing more than life being messy. I'm supposed to land this. I'm supposed to give you a twist or a confession or a moment where I say, and that's when I realized the truth, and you clap or you sigh, and you go to bed feeling fed. I don't have that. I have only a man in a coat with frost on his cuffs who keeps repeating the sentence, something was wrong. And the echo answers, prove it. And he can't. If you ask me what keeps me up, it's the notion that someone took her phone after she was already gone, that they stood in that room with the radiator and the candle and the mug, and they said, I need this more than I need to be decent. That thought puts a bleak on my tongue. That thought makes me look at strangers and wonder who in a crowd has that subtraction in them. And if I'm wrong, and the phone fell into the dumbwaiter shaft to sing to the mice for a century, then I have punished a hypothetical person for a hypothetical sin, and I'd like to apologize to the whole universe for being so eager to cast. The other thing, you keep asking yourself, was there a goodbye? Not a note, an action, a call to someone that didn't go through, a playlist set to loop a song with a line that meant something to her and nothing to you. I didn't find that. Maybe because it wasn't there. Maybe because the universe is stingy with clarity. It gives you fragments and tells you to make a mosaic that looks like certainty. The mosaic always has gaps, and you stand there pretending the gaps are intentional. I could talk about this for hours. I have. My friends tell me to write it down, so this is me doing my homework late. This is me scribbling margin notes on a case file that won't read them. This is me being honest about the way mystery is sugar and poison and caffeine. It wakes you up. It rots your teeth. It makes your hands shake when you finally stop. Sometimes I replay the moment I first touched that window. The cold bit my palm through the glass. The city exhaled in. The latch looked like a stubborn eyebrow. If you wanted to write a poem, you could. I hate that I just thought that. I am a man who makes metaphors out of hardware. Retirement is wild. Maybe the lesson is not for me. Maybe it's for you listening. Maybe it's to notice little hums in your life, not to make them villains, not to make them the plot, just to respect them. The mug in your sink with 2 rings, the draft that tells you your house is old and true. The phone you forget and find and realize it's not your oxygen, you just made it one. Be kind with your interpretations. Be violent with your curiosity only when it doesn't hurt anyone. If I could go back, what would I do different? I'd take the mug. No, that's not allowed. I know the rules. I'd swab it better. I'd take samples from the rim and fight the lab for priority. We swabbed. We got a profile that matched hers and a maybe that matched the world. People touch things. The world is crowded. It's easy to leave yourself on everything. Maybe I'd tape the window, check the seal with smoke. I did not, because sometimes the clock takes your choices away while you think you still have options. When you leave a scene like that, you do a silly thing sometimes. You look back, even if you're not superstitious. You look back because your kid brain believes that if you don't, the scene becomes more haunted. I looked back. The door was being fixed. The chain clinked like it had a song. I walked out into air that felt less sharp. I told myself it would dull with time. It didn't. It changed flavor. It went from spike to hum. Hums are worse. They sit under your day like a bass line you can't turn down. So this is not closure. This is not even a cliffhanger. This is a cul-de-sac. We drive in circles and wave at each other and nobody parks. I say her name in my head and I respect her privacy in my mouth. I pick up my own mug and I check the rim like a fool. I lock my own door and I test the window like I can bully the air into telling me secrets. And if one day something breaks open, if someone finds a phone in a wall, or a mug in a thrift shop with a chip that matches a chip and a story pours like honey, I'll listen. I'll be relieved. I'll be mad. I'll be a man in a kitchen with a graph he never needed, laughing at himself for measuring condensation like it could measure grief. Until then, this stays exactly as it is. A locked apartment, a whispering window, a mug with 2 kisses, a silent pocket where a phone should be, a report that acts like a period and feels like a comma. You still with me? Cool, take this with you. Some endings are neat lies, some questions are loyal pets. This one sits at my heel, and follows me room to room, and sleeps at the foot of my bed, and wakes up when I do, and it's not cute. I call it by its name, the case that never sat right. It watches me make coffee. It watches me avoid the news when the news looks too much like the old report. It watches me lock my door. It laughs when I test my window and find a tiny breath sneaking in, like winter left me a message. I keep telling it back to myself, not to solve it, to honor it, to make sure I don't turn her into a genre, to remind me that certainty is a luxury and humility is a job. I was good at the first for years. I am learning the second very slowly, like a child with a hard puzzle and too few pieces. I am Detective John Mercer. They called me Jack. I am retired. I am not done. I may never be done. And if I sound like a man with quiet obsession, dressed in a loud coat, that's accurate. If I sound like someone with attention to things that shouldn't matter, that's also accurate. If I sound frustrated, it's because endings that don't sit right are like shoes that don't fit. You can walk in them, you just limp more. One last thing, it's the smallest. On the underside of that coffee table, there was a sticker. A small, stupid sticker, with a smiley face peeling away. I noticed it late, stuck my fingertip to the edge and felt the tack. It had nothing to do with anything. It made me want to cry. I didn't put it in the report. It's here now, because the universe is made of stuff that doesn't matter until you need it to. I needed something to be simple and dumb and not a clue. That sticker did the job. It let me feel human for 5 seconds in a room that wanted me to be a robot. Then I put my glove back on and remembered the draft and the mug and the missing phone and the locked door. I remembered I was here to be boring and thorough. I did it. It didn't cure me. That's the whole film. That's the reel I run. That's the story I tell when the night is loud and the morning doesn't want me. If it gives you anything, let it be this. Look at the details, then let them go. Let them go before they decide to make a home in you. I didn't. Now I am a house with a window that doesn't seal, and a mug that keeps refilling with questions, and a phone that rings in a pocket that isn't there. End of episode. Not end of anything.